Hello, Montessorians, and thank you so much for joining us for another session of our live coaching calls. Today, I am joined by Matt Hillis of Bergamo Schools and also the founder of Needle Marketing. Matt, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Yep. And we also have Deneen. Deneen, I'm going to butcher your last name. Goncalves?
Goncalves. That's okay.
Goncalves. I'm so sorry. Deneen's our community manager and brilliant Montessorian. Deneen, thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for today. It's gonna be
Yeah.
good.
And we're going to transition actually from our normal format, and Deneen is going to lead the charge, which we thought might be a little more appropriate since she is more versed in the Montessori narrative. So, Deneen, if you wouldn't mind, I'd love for you to introduce this topic for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna do my best. So here we go. So we're gonna do direct mail today, which I know is a hot topic and also something that Matt really enjoys and loves doing. But personally, I do as well because it's super important. And I think in our digital world, we may forget about it, but it is great to work with your digital presence as well as your direct mail, because who doesn't like to get a piece of mail that is directed towards you? And I always learn that in my classroom. So, Matt, I'm excited to hear what you have to say and kind of walk us through. And yeah, so here we go.
Okay. So, direct mail. Direct mail is not what it used to be. Direct mail, when I first started working at the school, we did a lot of direct mail. And this was because there were not digital channels to use for marketing our school online. We mostly, back when I started, and this was 15 years ago, we're using yellow page ads and print ads. And so direct mail was kind of like the third leg of the stool with our marketing efforts. And we spent a considerable amount of money and time on direct mail. Um, and here is the interesting thing about direct mail is that it's actually gotten better over the past 15 years in terms of effectiveness. And the reason why is because there is much less mail that goes out as compared to 15 years ago. So direct mail is a viable option today that's actually a good supplement to your digital marketing. Um, marketing and advertising in general is about awareness and repetition. And so obviously we're going to put the bulk of our attention to online efforts because that's where people are spending most of their time. But this is a really, really good supplement to be able to have that reminder or to nudge them to start interacting with us online. So it's been effective for us and we continue to use it. Um, the next point here is decreased saturation. I referenced this. So I think I don't have specific numbers to give you. What I can say is that I think we all can recognize that our mail continues to decrease in terms of the things that we get. And in fact, most of the things that I get in the mail now are um, are usually direct mail advertisements or some type of promotional item. I used to get all my bills in the mail. I get all my bills online now. I used to get letters from my grandmother. My grandmother doesn't send me letters anymore. She sends me emails. So just if you think about it in terms of that, the actual bulk of what we used to receive in the mail has now been supplanted by digital means. And so this basically leaves this channel open at a very cost-effective point to get your name and your presence out there to families in your neighborhood. Longevity and shelf life. If you print a really nice piece, and we're going to go into design and printing aspects later in the slide deck. You can actually have something you want to make it hard for people to throw away. You want to have this. This is definitely something you want to spend a little bit of money on. You don't want to send out something that looks like the penny saver on really, really, really cheap paper that's easy to crumple up and throw away. So I always spend a little bit of extra money on cardstock and cover gloss and those types of things to make sure that it is substantial, has a substantial look to it, and it's going to be harder for people to toss. 3 drops or nothing. When we talk about direct mail, this is not a silver bullet. Of course, nothing in marketing is a silver bullet, but more so than most everything else, direct mail is something you have to repeat. So when somebody opens up their mailbox, they have, you have about, 5, 6, 7 seconds to make an impression on them. And the first couple times they're going to see your postcard, they're going to toss it in the trash. But you have to be able to do multiple mailings, and it's that repetition that makes the biggest difference. And so what I really recommend is that, you don't have 5 different postcards that you're sending. You actually send one postcard like 6 or 7 times. And throughout the course of that, you're going to get your name awareness in there, and really kind of burn it in their brain, so that the fifth or sixth time they're saying, I've seen this before. This is something that I was interested in. I lost that previous postcard. I got it again. And I think a lot of our, as marketers and as Montessorians, I think we're always interested in, people are going to be burned out by us sending the same thing to them over and over again. I want to send a different postcard, so it's kind of unique. That is completely the wrong line of thinking. You want to send the same thing multiple times. The slide deck says 3. I would really actually encourage more like at least 5 in a 3 to 6 month period. I have been doing, when I was doing direct mail before, and it's been about 6 months since I did my last mail, I was doing 3-week intervals. So every 3 weeks I was sending the same postcard to a targeted list of people. And it was really, really effective. We were just opening up a new school, and we were trying to grow a new classroom that we were opening, and we did see the needle move on that. Costa, maybe you could talk a little bit about direct mail can elicit trust. I'm not exactly sure how you compare that to online, and you're really the digital guru here. What do you think about that?
Happy to. I think that, I've got an echo. Sorry, guys. I think that direct mail allows something tangible. So digital marketing tends to be very it can't be touched, and there's still something in the collective psyche of the world that says that if it's online, it may or may not exist. That's why people like brick and mortar so much, and so many consumers still to this day. This is a problem that Best Buy has. Just as an example, people go to Best Buy so they can see, feel, and touch appliances and electronics, and then they go to Amazon to buy it. And that lets us know that they still want the tactile. They still want that which can be, seen, felt, touched, held. And that's not digital marketing. Now, I'm not bashing digital marketing, obviously, because I'm a digital marketer. But there is something about direct mail that lets people know, hey, we're really here, because anybody can send a postcard, and it could be, a national batch and blast, whatever. But the nice thing about the postcard that comes to you from a school is, you're seeing a localized address. You might be seeing references to, geographic landmarks, or kind of inner community references that only somebody who actually lives there could make. And that, coupled with the fact that this is something that you can hold in your hand, pin to your refrigerator, it just tends to help build trust. So this isn't talking anybody out of digital marketing. The idea here is that we want to combine it with digital marketing in order to build that brand integrity that people really want to see. Was that a helpful answer, Matt? How did I do?
No, absolutely. I think it explained it very, very well. And again, this is one of those things that works well in combination. I would not be using direct mail as my only source of advertising, but it's a very, very good extender. It kind of boosts the effectiveness overall of your campaigns.
Very well said.
I love what you said about just making sure that you're doing it more than once. I think oftentimes, we put all of our energy into one thing or one piece of mail, but the repetition is really where you're going to get some groundwork, and you're creating an impression of who you are, and another avenue for people to understand who you are. So I
Absolutely.
love it.
And you know what? If people are getting sick of your postcard, that's how you know that it's working, right? Because they're noticing it. And I mean, that's how kind of I want them to feel like, gosh, they're sending this to me again. I have had people actually call the school to say, please stop sending us a postcard. And of course, we take them off the list, because I don't want to spend the 70 cents to print mail the postcard. But out of thousands of postcards that we've mailed, it's happened twice. So that's how actually I know that it is working. Quick pro tip on that: I want to say that when you're doing direct mail, you're going to want to add your school's address onto your mailing list. And the reason you do that is because I want to know when they have arrived. So if I'm doing a mailing and I'm sending my list to the person that's doing the mailing, I want to receive the postcard on the same day that everybody else in the community is receiving the postcard. So I can just kind of measure that effectiveness. Number one, I know that it's been sent out and received. Number one, I see what it looks like after going through the U.S. Postal Service. And number three, excuse me, I can kind of say, hey, this is a very subjective way of measuring it, but I can also say, hey, our postcard hit today. Over the next 2 days, I wonder if our phone is going to ring more. I wonder if our landing page is going to have more visits, because I know exactly when it's hitting.
That's a great pro tip.
Perfect.
All right, so I'm going to move on to the next category here, which is the options available to us in direct mail. Deneen, would you mind sort of introducing this slide, and then we'll pass it over to Matt to help explain?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're talking about, why are we talking about direct mail today? Why is it important? And I know, Matt, you touched on that a little bit, but let's get into the details of what your options are and what that looks like. And I know you've got some examples too, that you're going to be so gracious to share with our members. So direct mail options, tell us more.
Sure. So I have exclusively used postcards. Now, we listed out here all the different types of things to send. But the reason I use postcards is, there's a number of reasons. Number one, it is the most cost-effective form of doing it in terms of printing and mailing. You can get bulk rates on mailing postcards. It is cheaper than mailing a formal letter. You can actually print the postcards with the bulk mail permit on there, so it's already ready to go. If you have a mail house that's doing that, that's probably what they'll do. All in all, it's the most cost-effective thing. And so the way that I do postcards, I always do postcards that are 6 inches by 9 inches. That's actually one of the biggest options that are available at the jumbo bulk rate. Sometimes people will try to sell you on smaller postcards, and you can save a little bit of money with a 3x5 or a 4x6. I still think that, again, if our goal is to make it hard for them to throw away, I want to make sure that it's as big as possible. I've even experimented with like super large postcards before. I think they got up to like 6.5 by 11. I didn't see a whole lot of difference in terms of effectiveness for those campaigns, so I went back to 6 to 9, which was my kind of go-to. So that's really what I use now. And again, you have a short window of time. You have less than 10 seconds to make an impression on somebody. And for most things, if we're talking about letters, which are the next option, letters can be effective. They're going to be more expensive for you to do. And also, when I get a bulk mail letter, I can immediately tell, unless they're very, very skilled at what they're doing, that this is a bulk letter. And I rarely actually open the envelope. I just put it right through the shredder. Like if I see that bulk mail insignia, or if I see that bulk mail stamp that they put up in the right-hand corner, that's usually a tip to me, like, this is not worth my time to actually sit and open this letter. So for me, when I'm thinking about the school, when you're taking out the postcard, you're going to look at the picture, right? And if it's a beautiful image of a child, or a child and a teacher together, you can make that impression. Whereas for a letter, you're going to spend more money, and the chances of them opening it are not as high, or you having an impression. So I have used letters before. We've used letters actually for Nito at one point, and I think that if they're handwritten, that is a much better way of doing it. In fact, at one time, this was a number of years ago for the school, I did a direct mail letter, and I actually had the children in one of the upper elementary classrooms hand write out the address on the envelope. And we were doing such a small drop that I think we had like 300 or 400 direct mail letters to go out, but the children hand addressed them. Now the open rate was amazing. And I actually had good response from that, but it was one of those things where, working with a group of 9 to 12-year-olds and getting them to do things on a schedule, especially, that's really not their purpose. They were doing it as an exercise. They were practicing their cursive. That's not something you can rely on in the long term to really have a consistent drop of those things, but it was very effective. So, and who's not going to open up an envelope that looks like it was addressed by a child, right? Or looks like it's in beautiful cursive. So that was really, really effective, but it's not very practical. So letters can work, and Qasim, I know there are some services that will actually emulate a handwritten address or a handwritten letter. Is that correct?
There are. We've used it for other clients. There's a service out there called yellowletters.com, and they have a special type of printer that it actually uses a pen, and there's a machine that physically writes the letters, and they insert some idiosyncratic kind of markings to make it look very much like a real person wrote the letter.
I would assume that the cost of that is going to be relatively high.
It's higher than postcards for sure. It's not so expensive that it's not worth doing, but I think based on what you just said, I'd encourage our members to start with postcards first, where I think some of these options come into play. I just wanted everybody to know what was available because, if you are talking to a printing house, they're going to try to push some of this on you. And depending on your demographic, if you're in an area where you think that this might appeal, if there's a specific use case, then the handwritten letters are definitely worth looking at. I'm thinking like, invitations to events, for instance, might be worthy. But for general marketing purposes, it sounds like based on your recommendation, Matt, that postcards are the way to go.
They are. I think that letters could be effective if you had a very, very small list that was targeted. So for instance, if you were opening up a new infant or toddler program and there's a limited number of spaces that are available, the cost point is high. If you're getting a list of people in your area that are in a very high demographic, and let's say you only get 200 people on the list, that could be something that could be really effective for a series of handwritten letters, because that the people that are receiving it have children that are aged for your classroom. There's a limited number of spaces, and that they can afford it, and that they are in your area. So that could be something that's effective. I would not do that we send out, when we're doing our postcards about primary, and even for toddler, we could have 3,000 or 4,000 people on the list, right? Where 3,000 postcards are being mailed out. That would not be effective for a letter.
Totally agree.
Matt, I have a question for you. When you have your letters that you're sending out, where do you get your addresses from? How do you cultivate those?
Oh, that's a great question. And when we share my screen later, I'm going to walk you through how you build a list on a site called InfoUSA. And I'm going to show you exactly how I do that.
Perfect. Awesome.
I wanted to briefly share, this is the handwritten tool I was referring to, and you can actually see in this image here, it's a real fountain pen, and I think they do an excellent job at producing these. And the advertisement that I clicked on when I reached this page said for as little as $3.50 per send, which is cost prohibitive, of course, but like you said, Matt, if you have a very small and targeted list, it might be worth looking at.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I want to speak just briefly to the gifts and usable items, again, because it's something that you'll be presented with if you reach out to a printing house. Like any other business, they're going to try to ascend you. I do think that there's a place for them in certain contexts, specifically things that if you can end up on somebody's refrigerator, I think as a marketer, that's a really big deal. I can tell you from experience that, my wife has a nutritionist's calendar inside of our pantry door. And so we end up looking at that almost every single day, which means we end up looking at the nutritionist's value proposition every single day. And we've actually bought some of our supplements from her. So if and when it's appropriate and applicable, I think a calendar or a checklist, like a back to school checklist, might be an appropriate thing to send. But we just need to be careful not to come off as, we don't want to be that big box daycare. And that's why gifts scare me a little bit from a narrative standpoint. Matt, any agreement or disagreement there? Anything you'd want to touch on?
I completely agree. It would have to be so perfectly targeted to the need of the receiver that they literally couldn't throw it away. So like, if you have a local promotional house that wants you to do pens, for instance, that pen is going to be tossed. And it's not like they're going to use it. Now, I will say that, we have, I don't think they've been mailed out yet. And maybe they've been revealing the curtain here, but we're doing some direct mail with some of the schools on our list, and we're sending them the top cube to a pink tower. that is a perfect gift. And the reason why is because if a head of school opens up an envelope and has a letter from us, and in a little baggie that is clipped to the top of the letter, there's 2 or 3 pink tower cubes. I know just from experience that, in April, I have guides coming to me saying, "Hey, we lost that pink tower cube went missing again. Do you have any extras? We can never have enough of those." So that is a good example of a gift. And this isn't about for parents, but it's a good example of the type of gift that you would want to have sent in this. That is worth the cost, because that would be impossible to throw away. It's very usable.
I'm thinking about a calendar specifically for Montessori schools. It'd be really fun for us to build a calendar that was based on Maria Montessori's life and find, benchmark events for each month, um, and, kind of include like biographical information. And that's a template that we could house for our members if they wanted to print out and send out calendars. Do you think that would be of value?
Would that be valuable to parents that are receiving this that may know very little about Montessori?
I don't know. I think that's why I'm asking is somebody who's interested in Montessori may find it interesting, but to your point, if they don't know anything, then maybe it's just another thing that gets tossed.
Well, so I don't know if I would spend the money on that. And the reason why is because 90% of people, 95% of people are going to have a very, very, very base level awareness of Montessori. They're not going to know anything about it. And it's our job as through the admissions process and basically once we get their contact info to educate them about what Montessori is. But I don't necessarily know if that would resonate with people. I wouldn't want to buy that en masse for people that I was sending direct mail to.
I'm going to stick to my day job as a marketer. On to the next slide. And we're talking about geographic segmentation.
So we're talking about building the list custom. Is that the concept?
Yes, sir. And before we dive into some of the list building services, I'd like to talk about the strategy that we approach those services with, because I feel like this is the precursor. And
Sure.
just like with PPC, we need to know, what geography to target, why, and how you go about making those decisions.
Yeah. So this is very, very similar to what we've talked about with targeting our online ads. In fact, it's probably identical, quite honestly, because we don't want to spend money for people who would not be geographically affiliated, for lack of a better word, with our school. And this depends really on a case-by-case basis with your school. We have some schools that are in rural areas. We have some schools that are in the middle of Chicago. Our school is in a suburban area of Sacramento. So what you need to do is you need to be able to think about what parent is going to, how far are they willing to drive? You have to think about analyzing their commute paths. I mean, that's really the first thing we put up on there. And the reality is that most of us will have parents that are both are working, and they have schedules, and they have to get to work. And where are they working, and how are they getting there? There's not it even if Dr. Montessori had a school, and literally Maria Montessori was teaching in this school. In 2018, you're not going to find a whole lot of parents that are going to drive an hour out of their way each way to come to this school. They're just not. I mean, they don't have the time to be able to do that. They're too busy. So you need to be able to think about when you're targeting your geographic segmentation, what is the maximum amount of time that people would want to go out of their way to come to your school in terms of distance, in terms of drive time. This can also depend on traffic. I'm going to Atlanta in November to speak to the Montessori Administrators Association of Atlanta, and I was talking to somebody about kind of the scheduling and when my flight was coming in, and she said, on a Friday night when you come in, it can take 2 hours to get from the airport to our school. Oh my gosh, 2 hours. How would that impact your geographic segmentation? And that really gets back to my point about that it's on a case-by-case basis. I know very well in Sacramento how people commute to downtown. I know where they generally tend to work. I can tell by our existing families. This is your next point here, where you can Google Maps has a great feature. If you can export the addresses of your your parents to a spreadsheet, you can upload that to Maps. I'm not sure if that's an extension or if that's a base level service through Google Maps, but you can see then, all of your 100 families or your 500 families on a map. So you can almost, you can create like a visual representation. You can see, gosh, I've got so many people coming from this area. This is where I'm going to put most of my attention in terms of segmentation too. Do you know anything about that map feature, Qasim, or am I just speaking out of turn?
No, I don't think you're speaking out of turn at all. The interesting thing with the demographic information available with maps is I don't know how well that tends to be updated within list buying services. So when I've purchased list information in the past and I try to segment my list according to where people are and then add a separate axis, let's call it, I've always noticed a fair bit of dilution. So it scares me to do.
Understood. Identifying new areas of opportunity. So this would be, there's a number of different ways that I've actually done this. So sometimes when schools are closing, or like we had in Sacramento, we had a very large Montessori school that operated, and it closed about 6 or 7 years ago. And I was able to note where they were and think about the parents that would be looking for another program, so I could target those parents to come to our school. That actually was pretty effective. Looking for new home developments, that's a big one. I mean, most new home developments that are coming through, most of those people are going to have kids. When you're looking at either starter homes or mid-range homes in commutable areas, so that's definitely something you would want to target. Another new area of opportunity is like new roads and new freeway interchanges. When we opened up our new school in El Dorado Hills, they just happened to be opening up a new freeway interchange, which really changed the whole dynamic of how people could get to our school. So it opened up a whole other segment of the population, whereas before it would have taken them 20 minutes to get to our school. Now it's actually taking them 7 minutes to get to our school because they have a much more direct path. So you have to really be aware of your community, your metro area. This could even come, in really dense areas, this could even come down to public transportation. If I were in New York, I would really want to be aware of the subway lines and how people get to and from work. That can be a little bit overwhelming. I don't want you to think about like you have to have, be a master urban planner. You just have to be aware of the patterns of your parents. And if you look at how the bulk of your parents are coming to your school, it'll give you a lot of information to then make some educated guesses about how other people could be coming to your school.
And Matt, do you target home address and work address, or are you looking just at where people live?
We only do home address.
Okay, just curious.
Mm-hmm. And then knowing which areas to exclude. This would definitely be something where traffic would be something to factor in for sure. There could be, especially in the San Francisco Bay Area, you could have a school, that's 3 miles away from a home, but could be an hour to commute. And if it wasn't on a commute, if it wasn't on their way to the place where most people work, that's an area I would definitely want to exclude, because most people aren't going to want to spend an hour in the car both ways each day to take their child to a half-day program or a 2 o'clock program or whatever it is. So knowing that helps quite a lot. Also, areas to exclude, if there's some dominant programs in your area, and especially if you're a newer school, you may not want to target or spend as much money in an area where you know that it's very, very saturated with one school or a series of schools that could make it harder for you to capture attention and maybe convince people to change. So those would be my 2 points on that.
Okay, I'm going to move on to demographic segmentation. And Deneen, I think you had an intro for this slide as well.
Yeah, we just want to look and see what our options are as far as sending them out. And Matt, is this a good time also, as we talk through this, to toggle back and forth with what you want to show us as far as options?
Sure, absolutely.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can share yours, Matt.
Okay. All right. How's that look?
Looks great.
Okay. So I buy all my lists from a company called InfoUSA. There are some other lists that exist. However, I found that InfoUSA usually has the most complete lists and also is the easiest to use. I've found them to be very attentive to my needs. One thing I'll say about lists is, there are a number of list brokers out there. One thing I like about InfoUSA is that they're large and well known, and this isn't going to be a kind of a fly-by-night company that could, sell you some stale information. This is one of those things where, people move, and unless you have a company that really they're large and they have a lot of resources in making sure that the addresses that they're giving you are accurate, especially because we're targeting it so specifically, right? If this was just, if I had a pizza company and I was sending out, flyers about my pizza, it doesn't necessarily matter who is in the house where this is being sent to, because most people like pizza. However, if I'm sending out a postcards about Montessori school, I want to make sure very, very clearly that they meet our needs, that they have children under a specific age, that they have a certain level of income, and that is really, it really does press the point that you want to make sure that the information is accurate. So that's why I wanted to use a very well-known company. InfoUSA is probably the largest list broker in the United States. Again, I don't have specific data on that, but I've had success with them, and they came recommended to me from a series of mail houses that I worked with before. So,
and Matt, you find them to be pretty cost effective too?
Yeah, for a list of 3,000 names, I think I spend about $300. And again, because it's not I burn my lists in about a year. So like every year over year, I'm going to want to buy a new list. And there's a reason for that. Number one, like I said, people move. But number two, as you're going to see here, we're actually asking for very specific lists. Like they have children between the ages of 0 and 2 in the house. Well, guess what happens after a year? Those children are now 1 and 3. And I'm not going to want to send a postcard about our infant program to somebody if they don't have infants anymore. So it's one of those things where it has to be very, very targeted in order to be successful.
I see.
So if you come to InfoUSA, I'm just going to walk you through here. Click on the Get Started button. So it's going to ask for you for a marketing type. As you can see, I currently have, because I have in the United States, over here it says there's 106,170,028 leads. Those are basically 106 million addresses that they have, because that's everybody in the United States. I think they get in Cosm. I don't know if you know this. I'm not sure exactly how they do it. I think they work with like credit card companies and credit score companies to dial all this information in. Do you know how that works?
Yeah, so everybody here on this phone, or excuse me, on this call has probably received a phone call from somebody verifying information from them. And you don't often know that that's what they're doing. It sounds like a telemarketing call, but it ends abruptly. That's people like the folks at InfoUSA trying to improve the quality of their list. So they purchase the list in mass. And Matt, you're absolutely right. A lot of it comes from credit card companies. Quite a bit of it used to come from promotional companies. So like if you're in the shopping mall and somebody says, hey, sign up to win a new Mustang, those people they're doing nothing but building these lists to sell to other people. There was a stop put to that, at least a partial stop by Congress. So the promotions were very heavily clamped down on. But credit card companies, if you read the fine print, you'll find that one of their primary sources of monetization is selling your information to other people. And then where InfoUSA improves upon just a list that anybody can purchase is they have this massive call center, oftentimes offshore, and somebody calls up and says, oh, yeah, is Matt Hillis there? And the minute you say yes, they might hang up on you. Or they might ask you like, oh, are you still in Sacramento or whatever? And you'll hear more of that as a small business owner than you will as a person, but you'll still get it as a person. Sometimes you'll get a phone call, and if you just answer, hi, this is Matt, they'll hang up immediately, because all they want to do is verify that your phone number matches your name. And now they've been able to improve the integrity of their list.
Interesting. Well, that's probably why we get all those privacy notices from our credit card companies, and in the fine print, they let us know that they're actually stealing our information.
Yep.
But it does enable us to be able to, do cost-effective marketing for things like Montessori school. So when you're choosing your list, I always do mailing. So you can choose, there's ones that will give you their phone number too. Obviously, we're not calling people. The last thing we want to do is do telemarketing for Montessori school. I think that would be gross. But no, we don't do that. So we only choose leads for mailing. This is interesting. This is new. I've never seen this before. So this is about, they're trying to say, choose your level of risk. They will give you more people on your list, even if the address may not be correct, right? So they're saying if some risk, that means you're going to basically get many more people on your list that they're gonna send to you. I don't want that. I want actually low risk is what I want. Because I want only the addresses that are the most deliverable. So they're very, very certain that these people fit the demographic that you are choosing. So choosing your, the geography, this is what we talked about. Now, I'm not going to open up this select draw from map tool because it takes a little bit of time to set up, and I don't want to do that on the phone call. I have used this, and I continue to use this. You can actually pull up a map and you can draw like an area. And this is really cool because, again, it's not necessarily like it's going to be, all people within 10 miles of your school, because there could be, in one direction, there could be, a major construction project that's going on and people can't get to your school that way. I don't know. My point is that with the map, you can actually draw a very specific area where you want the leads to come from. But for the sake of this phone call, for this coaching call today, we're just going to choose a radius around a location, but I would suggest that you use the map function when you do that. So let's just choose here. I'm going to say we want to go 10 miles. Now, you could also choose specific zip codes if you wanted to. You can choose cities. Again, that tends to be a little bit more, I prefer either a radius or a map because it can be much more specific. And again, if we're spending, anywhere between 70 cents to $1 to print and mail this postcard, that makes a big difference, right? If you had, an extra 200 or 300 people on the list, that's just kind of throwing that money down the drain. So I like to use the map as a number one go-to. And then if that's not something you feel comfortable with, you can choose a radius around an address or a zip code. So I'm going to press go and continue. Okay, so adult age. This is a really interesting thing to think about. So when I think about people at our school, they tend to skew a little bit older. There could be somebody who is 18 to 24 or 25 to 29 that has an infant or toddler. They're most likely not going to be a mission appropriate family for our school. We tend to actually skew, and I would say this about most Montessori schools, a little bit older. So I'm actually willing to do anybody over the age of 30 all the way up to 55 to 59. Sometimes, and quite honestly, I'd probably go 60 to 64. I may even go 65, 69, because as you're going to see, they're going to have children in the household. So you could have some grandparents, for instance, that maybe are raising a child, or maybe have the parents living with the grandparents, and InfoUSA is going to think that, there's a child in the home and this person is 65. That's totally fine. So the only thing I'm going to omit is people from the ages of 18 to 29. Again, your results may vary according to your community and how that works, but this is what works here for us, is that basically I'm saying I'm only going to send these postcards to somebody that's a minimum age of 30. That seems to work for us. I don't care about the date of birth. Some of this, when you think about it, this is where it starts to get a little bit creepy, because you can get so much information on people. I don't care about the month of their birth, but if you were doing like a targeted direct mail campaign to wish somebody happy birthday, I mean, you could do that. You could say, only give me a list of people that were born in June. So anyway, we're just going to choose adult age between 30 basically and 69.
Can I pause you there, Matt?
Sure.
I just want to say that that's so surprising to me, and not in a bad way. I think your explanation makes perfect sense. But if I had just launched my own school and I went to go buy a list, I would have done this exactly wrong. And so I just think it's a really good case study as to why the value you're bringing to us is so great, because this is a lesson that I would have learned the hard way after, 10, 15, or 20 mail drops. That little gold nugget alone, I think, is worth the cost of the time on this call.
Well, you're very welcome. Happy to help. When we started Nito, as I said before, this is basically a manifestation of all the mistakes that I've made, right? So please, I would not recommend that you select people from 18 to 24, because they're not going to be a good fit for your school.
Yeah, well received.
Estimated household income. This is a big one. So this is something you definitely want to choose. For us, we target people who make over $100,000 a year. By the time you're factoring in our tuition, which is anywhere between $1,200 and $1,700 a month, you have to think about, are they going to be able to afford this? And this isn't about a financial aid program, which we do offer, right? But I'm not going to be advertising. I'm not going to be spending money on advertising for people to come in and get financial aid. Those people will find us on their own because they're really interested in Montessori. This is when we're thinking about spending, upwards of $1 per postcard to be printed and mailed. Who do we want to receive this? And I'm going to choose people that have an income of over $100,000 at a minimum. Marital status and gender and household, I don't care anything about this. This is, you could be married, you could be single, you can be female, you can be male. I don't care if you're a head of household, so I just leave that blank. That has nothing to do with who I'm trying to target for these messages. So to continue, we have everybody over the age of 30, and we are anybody with an income of over $100,000. Press continue. Okay, do we care if they own a home or what their home value is? I don't. I have no need to know this information, so I leave that blank. And again, you have to think about from a who do you want to spend money on in order to get this message in front of them? Why does it matter how much their home costs? That's not really a discerning factor in terms of whether or not they're going to be interested in a Montessori school. Now, if I was a mortgage broker, for instance, this would probably be really pertinent information for me to know about and me to be able to segment my list. But for us, we're going to leave it blank. Housing type is the same thing. This is, I don't care if somebody lives in an apartment or a condominium or when their home was built or how long they've lived there. That doesn't make any difference to me, so I leave that blank. Personal finance. This is interesting. This is a new one, actually. Wealth Finder. You can find people to give their general net worth. Again, not terribly concerned about that. I'm concerned about their average annual income. And I'm not concerned about their number of credit card accounts. So I'm going to leave all that blank again. And again, mortgage information. I don't necessarily only want to select households with a mortgage. So I'm going to leave that blank. So the only thing we chose here, we didn't choose anything in this segment. So we're going to press continue. Okay, this is the big one. I want to make sure that these are going to people that have children. Why would I want to send a postcard about a Montessori school to somebody who doesn't have children, right? That is a complete waste of money. So I'm going to choose households with children. Now, where do we go from here? Age of children. So we send out, as I've talked about before, we have programs that start at infancy and they go all the way up through elementary. We do little to no advertising for elementary because they all come up from primary. So we are doing mostly direct mail for primary, but really actually toddler is probably the biggest one that we do direct mail for. And the reason is because if we have full toddler programs, I know that every year we're going to have 12 children that move up to primary. Our primary classrooms have 36 children. And that means that every year we've got 12 new children coming up. And if all goes well, we should be able to have those first year students just naturally matriculate up. So I want to make sure that I always have full toddler programs. And at the schools, we have multiple toddler programs on site. So we do have, 24, 36, at our Sacramento school, between the two locations, we have spots for 36 toddlers. So that's, you have to fill those spots and they're not all going to come up from our infant program. So this is something we put a tremendous amount of attention to. So if I were advertising for toddler, I would want to make sure that I limit the age of the children to 2. Our toddler program, children transfer up to primary, but anywhere between the age of 2.5 to 3. And ideally, I would want a child starting in 18 months, but it can't be that granular. So interesting kind of thought process here is, when would you want to start the advertising of toddler? I think that if somebody had a 6-month-old child, I definitely want to get information to them about our toddler program, right? Because that sometimes takes a longer time for them to decide. Maybe the mom is staying home for a period of time and she's going to go back to work when the child is 18 months. So if I were doing a direct mail campaign for toddlers, this list that I'm purchasing now, I would want to make sure that it goes from age 0 to age 2. If I were doing primary, I go from age 2 to age 4. Because again, this could go to somebody with a 2-year-old. They can start primary as young as 2.5. It's usually somewhere between 2.5 and 3. So it's going to give them kind of a 6-month lead time before they're even applicable. But again, what you're trying to do is really the goal of this. And as we get to the actual postcard design, our goal is to somehow get their contact information so we can get their email. And then once we have their email, we can advertise this program to them over a period of time. So for primary, it would be ages 2 to 4. I would not do it all the way up to 5, right? Even though we have children in primary that go, all the way to 6 and sometimes even 7 if they need more time in primary. We very rarely would start a 5-year-old in primary. And quite honestly, I don't even like starting 4-year-old in primary. We'll take them if we have openings and we have to fill a space. But ideally, we want children starting at 3. So I'm going to put the cap at age 4 for primary so that we don't have people coming to us with a 5-year-old looking to enroll in a primary. Again, your results may vary for your school. And yes, we have admitted 5-year-olds before, but it's not something we like to do as a consistent practice. So again, we're going to go back to and pretend that this is a mailing list for a toddler postcard, because that's the postcard that I'm going to show you. So I'm going to make sure that this list is from children from the ages of 0 to 2. I don't care if there's people with veterans or grandparents in that household. That doesn't necessarily matter to me. Everything else here, again, you can get super granular with like interests. This has no bearing on what we want to do. Like if I was a gym, maybe I would use this as a way of narrowing by hobbies and interests. I don't do that. All I'm doing is I'm segmenting by zip code, or basically location. I'm segmenting by income. And the most important thing is I'm segmenting by households with children and the age of the children. Those are the 3 big ones that you want to do. Now, what's interesting to note is that before you buy this list, anytime you're doing things with the age of children, InfoUSA is going to have to verify that you are in fact a school. They will not sell you this list if you're just, some person on the internet looking to buy a list of addresses where children live. So what I had to do was, write a letter on our letterhead and upload it, and they verified the fact that we were a school. And then once we did that, they were able to sell us this list. So just realize that it takes a little bit longer, but I do think that's important to do. So I'm going to press continue. Okay. So listen, we've got 3,000 leads that match this criteria. So within 10 miles of this address right here, we've got 3,000 people that make over $100,000 a year, that are between the ages of 30 and 70, and that have children between the ages of 0 to 2 in the house. That's not bad. That's not a bad list. So from there, you would say, I wonder how much this is going to cost. Yeah, it's gone up a little bit. So when you're doing this, they're going to want to sell you this complete package, which you do not need. All you need is the basic package here. And it's going to be about 10 cents, between 10 and 12 cents a lead, as you can see. So about $400. And this is the information you need to be able to give to your mailing house, or if you're going to do it yourself, to be able to mail this. This becomes a little bit more specific for things that I don't necessarily need. I don't need to know if they're a cat or dog owner. That is I have no need for that in terms of doing a direct mail campaign. So that's InfoUSA. It's pretty easy to use, and it's fun to see. Another cool thing is here, and this isn't going to be immediate because you won't be able to I think they have to email this to me, but you can click and see the leads on the map. So it'll actually show you a map, but it'll show you a little pinpoint about where every address is. So you can see, oh my gosh, we've got, that's another great way of kind of determining your criteria in the future about where people live and where you should be targeting, because you can see demographically where these people live on a map. I'm going to click that in a second and see if that does pop up. One thing that I would do is recommend that you do is that you save the search. So you're going to do a series of searches, especially if you're doing multiple lists. You're going to want to have an account here, and you can save the search so you can come back to it and not have to do that every time you load, because lots of times I'll go in and kind of build my lists over time. And then when I'm ready to purchase it, I'm going to do it all together in one fell swoop. And I'd like to have those saved in order to do. So seeing the leads on a map, oh, maybe it is more immediate. Let's see here. Yeah, you know what? Let's not go through this thought exercise, because just know that you can do it and you can figure it out, so you can see all the different leads on your map. So that's Info USA. Qasim, Deneen, was there anything unclear about that?
No. Great.
Sorry,
Sorry,
Qasim, I'm gonna go off. I do have a specific question for you, though, because it was very, very thorough as we saw as you were walking through it. And I couldn't help but think about how when we work with Montessori schools, we're going through a very similar process when it comes to digital marketing. Maybe not quite as thorough, but it's and Qasim, maybe you can chime in a little bit. There's a lot of connection when it comes to those two pieces, because ultimately we're talking about targets and specific targets. So that was kind of cool as you were explaining that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that there are some direct mail and digital marketing ninjas that somehow kind of connect the two. I've never been able to do that. I just use them as kind of a supplemental thing. Qasim, don't know if you wanted to chime in at all on what Deneen said.
Yeah, I think that there's actually a way that we can use your direct mail lists in our digital marketing efforts. Info USA allows to segment by prospects with email addresses. And so if you do everything that you just did, Matt, and also get an email, which might cut your list in half. Let's say there was 3,000 people on that list. Maybe Info USA only has 1,500 with an email. But if we purchase that list as well, or try to include email where possible, we can use the email address in both Facebook and Google for custom audiences and lookalike audiences, and effectively target those folks using digital marketing methods, which I think would be great, because now they're getting a postcard from us and they're seeing our ads online, and the narratives match and we maintain continuity. That's definitely worth trying.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So Matt,
Okay.
when you have this list, what do you do with it now? Does Info USA send out what you give them, or is it now that you have a list, you work with another company that is printing your stuff and sends it out? What does that process look like?
So great question. So you're going to get the list. You're going to order it online with a credit card. They're going to send you a CSV or Excel file, and you're going to save it. What do you do with that list? So now you have to decide about what you're going to print, and then finally you're going to decide about how you're going to mail it. So maybe we should go into the printing next. I'm not sure what the next slide is. Maybe we should not unshare my screen so we can go back to the slide for a second. Here we go. Stop sharing.
And that's best practices for sending, and I think this can apply to printing too.
Yeah. Should I just go into the postcard design and then printing options?
Yes, sir. I think that's great. This was all kind of above board, so if you wanted to show your design, I can stop sharing as well.
I'll share my screen again. All right. So, oops. There we go. Okay, so can everybody see the postcard?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is an example of a postcard that we used for toddler, and I want to point out some important aspects of it. Number one is your image. This is the most important thing. So I talked about the fact that you've got less than 10 seconds, probably more like 5, when somebody opens up their mailbox and they're looking at what you sent them. What is it that you want them to feel? you need to have a compelling image. And this will take some time. So this is not something you never ever want to use a stock image. You want to use an image from your school. You want to use an image that people have an emotional reaction to. So this is Maria Moreno. She's one of our toddler guides, fantastic guide, well-trained at the Montessori Institute at Denver. She's great. And you can see from this image, it evokes emotion in me, and I'm not a parent, right? It evokes emotion in me because she is so caring and she is so attuned with him, and he obviously trusts her. Look at his hand. Look at how he's holding her hand. Look at the expression on his face. If you were a mother who was thinking about going back to work, if you were a mother that was interested in Montessori, if you were a mother who was considering a nanny at home, how would this make you feel? This has been a very effective postcard for us because of the image, first and foremost. So that's the very first thing I would say to you, is that you have to find your amazing image, and that will take you some time. This is something that is worth, if you don't have an in-house photographer, this is something that's worth having somebody come in to take professional images. This is not something you want to take on your iPhone. You want to have a very, very good image. So that being said, the next most important thing is the headline. So the headline is the terrible/terrific twos. I'm not going to take credit for coming up with that. In fact, I don't even remember where I heard that originally, but it always just made me think, I guess, for lack of a better word. It's stuck in my head because, people talk about the terrible twos a lot. And when you come into our toddler classrooms, there's so much joy, and the children are so industrious, and the children are setting the table for lunch. And, people are amazed by that. And it really is a terrific age. If you have a prepared environment and you have a prepared adult, it is unparalleled out there in terms of what other schools are offering. So it is terrific. And I think that that's a catchy headline. So the terrific twos, and then it says the toddler program at Bergamo Montessori. And then on most of the postcards, I have this little fold up corner here, which gives a little peek into our logo. And this is just mostly for branding because, again, we're doing a lot of online advertising. We're doing billboard advertising, and I want them to be able to see our logo and our name consistently. So that's there. So that's the front. So again, if you got this and you got 10 seconds and I'm a mother, and that's who we're targeting in here, would I look at the back of it? And the answer is yes. Most likely they would. Maybe after the third or fourth time, maybe they throw it away a couple times because they had a bad day or they were distracted by something else. But again, that's where repetition comes in. If you saw this message 5 or 6 times in the mail, you're eventually going to read it if you're a mother. And that's why it's so important that this goes to people that have children. Because if this goes to some dude who doesn't have kids, he's going to toss this in the mail and you've just wasted $1. And I don't like wasting time or money. So this is the back of the postcard. So the back of the postcard is where you're going to be able to put your copy. This is your copywriting right here. And I want to point out some compelling pieces of information. So again, you have another headline. This is called a subheadline. And our subheadline was world-class teachers to nurture your child's potential. We do have world-class teachers. They are, we're an AMI school. Montessori teachers are definitely world-class, best in the world, and they are nurturing their child's potential. Super important point. You are writing to a person. So we didn't say world-class teachers to nurture children's potential. It's your child's potential. You want to use that word you and your so much, like you're having a conversation with them, right? So world-class teachers to nurture your child's potential. Again, under the guidance of our AMI trained Montessori teacher, your child will develop a real sense of pride and a deep love of learning. So I like to use a format where I basically have 3 very short paragraphs. This is not a place where this is not an article. You want people to be able to browse this and to be able to read it quickly. And this is actually, for my standards, this is still a little bit wordy and jumbled because I threw in the testimonial down here. But if you look at the actual copy, we have a headline and we have 3 short paragraphs. Yes, it's true. We do think toddlers are terrific. So much so that we created an educational environment just for them, filled with wonderful things to see and do. And then I talked about that. And then at the very end, if you're searching for a unique, safe, and stimulating program, Bergamo may be the school you've dreamed about finding for your child. So copy is short and concise. And again, you can always edit that down. How can you say what you're saying in as short a time as possible so that people don't really have to read and digest it? Again, we're trying to make an impression, and we're trying to have them take one action. And that's where this part here becomes really, really important. This is our call to action. A call to action is telling them specifically what we want them to do. Right. So we're not just going to give them a postcard that doesn't tell them what to do. Because our address is on here, I guess they could probably come in and, and find our school that way, or maybe search for our school to get information. No. We're going to let them know specifically as a call out what we want them to do. And the call out says, get instant information. That instant word is a motivating word. Right? We don't want them to think that they're going to have to call and talk to 5 people before they can find out either how much it costs or where we're located or what type of program we are or why they should enroll their child. They can get that instantly, and they can do that 3 ways. They can text terrific. If they text the word terrific to 44222, they will get an immediate response, which sends them to a landing page to collect their email address. Costa, maybe that's something we should put as a follow-up for a coaching call in the future, which is using Lead Pages to do that. That's their program called Lead Pages. Again, interestingly enough, I thought that this would be the biggest way that people would opt in, and I would have maybe for each postcard, I would get maybe 4 or 5 opt-ins. Wasn't as high actually as the landing page. So if you go to bergamoschools.com/terrific, it's a specific landing page. I don't think it's live anymore.
It's not. I just checked.
Got it. Yeah. It's a specific landing page that is just about toddler, right? And again, landing pages is a whole separate topic of conversation that we will have a coaching call on. And again, it's going to a page that's just about toddler, right? So if they're getting instant information, if they log onto this website, it's going to be only about the toddler program for this school that they're interested in. They don't have to go to our homepage and find the program, right? It's basically, hey, thanks so much for coming to learn more about our toddler program. They got a toddler postcard. And then finally, we have a way of calling. That is a dummy number. And what that number does is it forwards to our main number, but it allows me to track the number of calls that we receive. So I know how effective our postcards are. So I can say, great, in the past month, we sent out 2 postcards and we had 12 calls to this phone number. And that's how I know that it's effective. So basically, all 3 ways are ways that they get information, but it also helps measure the effectiveness of our campaigns. I have a testimonial you'll find on our website, and on basically every piece of marketing collateral we put out there, we will always have a quote from a parent. And I've used this quote from Anne quite a lot. And she was a parent of 2 twin girls, actually 2 twins in one of our toddler programs. And she eventually went all the way through elementary. But that's a great quote, and it's a real person. So always put a testimonial on your marketing information. And then obviously you want to have the name, location, and domain name of your school. So this was our newest school that we opened up in El Dorado Hills. And then, again, this is another piece of social proof, just the fact that we've been around for, now it's 44 years, and our affiliation. So that is an example of a high-performing postcard. I have one for primary, which is similar. And again, compelling image. You have a picture of a child's face. There's a lot of data that talks about the effectiveness of human faces in marketing. And this is a really good image of a child. That is a high quality Montessori image, and I've used this one quite a lot. Headline is still looking for the ideal preschool for your child. Again, we are talking to people that are thinking about preschool. They may be interested in Montessori, right? But what they know is that they need a preschool for their child. And so we're piquing their interest. And once we get their information, we can talk to them about the benefits of Montessori for the primary environment. But I would never say as a headline, still looking for the ideal Montessori primary environment for your child. I mean, it's not going to, again, we're doing this in mass here. We're doing this with a large number of people. The vast majority have no information about what Montessori is. So do not use that jargon that we would use internally, right? We're going to use the word preschool because that's what we are. We are a preschool. We're a Montessori school. Montessori is our method, but we are a preschool. That's how people are going to think about us. So we have to use the words that they use. And then on the back of that, it's very similar. I do find it effective to be able to have bullet points or check marks when we're talking about benefits. And when we're talking about primary benefits are multi-age classroom allows your child to learn at his or her own pace. Master trained and experienced Montessori teachers inspire your child to become her best self. And new friends await your child in a beautiful classroom community of love and respect. Those are all things that we talk about in Montessori, but these are all couched in benefits to the parent and the child. It's not, our beautiful classroom environments are set up by our wonderful guides. That's true, but it's actually what is the benefit that it has to the child and the family. The benefit is that new friends await them in a beautiful classroom of love and respect. So very, very similar. And again, this has been another high performing postcard for us. So that's good examples of our postcard design. Any questions about that, Costumer Deneen?
None from me. I think both of those are amazing. Who designed these for you, Matt?
I have a local graphic designer that I work with.
Okay.
So that is probably a whole nother coaching call to talk about aspects of design. In terms of getting these out to people, do not waste the time to get your own bulk mail permit. Do not waste the time to stamp these yourself. You want to find a local mailing house, and if you Google search local direct mail house, you will find a series of people they're basically printing shops, and they also do mailing. And so what they'll do is they will print these and then they'll mail them for you. Here's another quick pro tip. If you're going to do 6 drops, if you're going to do 6 mailings, you want to print in as big a bulk quantity as possible, because the more you print, the cheaper it is per piece. So if I know that if I have got 3,000 people on my list and I know that I'm going to do that 6 times over the next 4 months, I'm going to print 15,000, right? I'm going to print 15,000 postcards. And then I'm going to ask the direct mail house, do you have the availability to store these and send these out in intervals for me? And most of them will. And so basically, you're never going to even see these postcards. They're going to print the 15,000 of them. They're going to separate them out into quantities of 3,000. They're going to pre-address them. And then they're going to mail them out on the schedule that you want. And you're going to say, I want to mail these out on this date, over the next 4 months, these 6 times. And again, add your own school's address to your list when you get this, because you want to make sure you receive this in the mail as well when it gets sent out. But this is definitely something that you want to shop around on. There are other companies that do this online. I don't like that. The reason I don't like that is because it's like I like being able to, and I've had to do this before. If I have to go down to the mail house to actually look at the postcards before they go out, or if there's a problem with something, I know that they're local. Sometimes, spending the amount of money that you're going to spend on direct mail and have them, in Florida or something, and never being able to actually know, it just made me a little bit nervous. And I've had some confusing things with people before. So I prefer to work with somebody that's local and give that business to a local print and mail house. But you basically need to Google search print and mail house, and then just tell them what you're going to do. And most likely they're going to want your business, and they're going to give you a price, and then you can compare. And it's not going to vary a whole lot. I mean, printing, especially because we're not doing, we're not a newspaper, or we're not doing mass quantities. We're doing a pretty targeted amount. It's not going to vary a whole lot. So, call 3 people, get 3 bids, and then go from there.
Matt, what should this cost? Let's say you have we just did a list in InfoYoso of 3,000 people. So let's assume that's a real number. Do you have a ballpark estimate you can give our members as to what they can expect to spend?
Anywhere between 70 cents and $1 to print and mail each card.
So that's all in.
Yeah.
That'll be the complete campaign.
Correct.
Okay, so 3,000 people could be $3,000 for this end.
Yeah, that would be a little bit high. And again, the more you do, I would prefer to get it down to the 75-cent range for printing and mailing. And there's also different options for postage. I mean, it gets pretty granular, but that's where you need to be able to work with the mail house and tell them, hey, what are the most cost-effective things? Do I really need this type of finish? What type of cardstock am I using? You can dial it in. I would want to spend ideally maybe about 85 cents to print and mail a 6x9 postcard. But again, it is an investment, right? So it's a good supplement, but you will waste your money if you spend $5,000 on direct mail and do 2 or 3 drops. You're going to waste your money. You see all the results on, drop number 4, 5, and 6.
That's very helpful. This is really awesome to watch you walk through this. I really appreciate you doing this for us. This is amazing information. At some point, I'd love to be able to create a postcard template for our members. I know we talked about that some time ago, but that might be
Yeah.
worth revisiting.
Absolutely. We can't use the images, obviously, from our school because the parent released them for using from our school, but the general layout and everything else could be absolutely duplicated or used.
Do you have any questions from our members? For those listening live, if you have any questions about direct mail, feel free to drop them into the chat. I know we've gone a little longer than normal, but I think it was really worth it doing because, Matt, your breadth of knowledge on this topic is really impressive. So if y'all have anything you want to ask us, please feel free to drop that in the chat. Deneen, anything you wanted to bring up?
Well, so this, hopefully, Matt, you can talk about just your overall approach to how you blast these out. I know early on the beginning you talked about, making sure that you're doing it multiple times. So if we're looking at a year, what is that scope for you? Are you heavy more on the earlier side in the summer? How does that look?
It's a fantastic question. And I would target it in January, February, March, April, and I would target it in July, August, September, October. Those are the windows of time that people are going to be most interested in enrolling their child in an early childhood program. Right? You're not going to have somebody looking in November. November, December, just busy times for families. They're going to start up again after the new year in January. So I'm never going to send out postcards in. Quite honestly, the latest I would probably send out a postcard is like maybe October 10th, because after that you get into Halloween, Thanksgiving, holidays, New Year, and that's just dead space. So, and unlike private school, where, private independent schools, they actually do a lot of their marketing for the next year in November. It's much different for early childhood education. And as for Montessori schools, we don't market in the same way. For our marketing should be solely focused on early childhood because all of our students should matriculate up from primary.
Right. Absolutely. Thanks, Matt.
Mm-hmm.
We've got 2 questions from Christy here online. She says, "Hi, thank you again for your time. I have 2 questions. One, if you have a limited budget, what marketing tool gets you the biggest bang for your buck? And 2, how do you keep track of the effectiveness of each marketing tool you use?"
Is that for me or for you, Qasim?
I think number 1 might be for you, and I'll take number 2.
Okay. If I had a limited budget, what marketing tool gets me the biggest bang for the buck? I would say Google AdWords. Now, but hold on a second. Let me back up. What does limited mean, right? So Qasim talks about a minimum of, I think he said a minimum of $500, preferably $1,000 spent on Google AdWords, right?
Yeah, 500 is the bare minimum, and that might not work in some markets.
Yeah.
1,000 is healthier, and it's a data saturation issue. If you don't have the information optimized against, then you end up not running an effective campaign.
So if you have $1,000 to spend, Christy, and again, you should think about this in terms of, can I take the cost of one tuition? That's roughly going to be, in the United States, that's roughly going to be in the area of anywhere between $750 and $1,250 a month. So I'm going to call it $1,000. If you can take one tuition, can you allocate that for your marketing? Google AdWords would be what I would choose because, again, people are searching directly for you. If you didn't have that much money, if you had less money, I would probably, that's a good question. What would I do for $500? Christy, I'm going to have to think about that one because I don't want to give you an off-the-cuff answer. And maybe we can have an answer for that next week on the call.
And we've seen some success with Facebook from the digital perspective. I don't know, Matt, if that's your answer per se, but I just wanted to chime in that if you don't have enough money for Google, Facebook can be worth testing, but it's definitely a test because it succeeds really well in some markets, and in other markets it fails, and it's hard to know what's going to happen before you begin the test.
And Matt, when you think about direct mail and the process of getting the list and printing the cards and having them do that, is there anything in that process that you could do in-house? I mean, I know it's a big undertaking, but if you've got a really great parent population, could you reach out to them and have them assemble things, or even a volunteer board or something?
You could, absolutely. The bulk of your cost is going to be in the mailing. So regardless of who assembles it, and the thing with postcards too is there's nothing to print. I mean, there's nothing to stuff and address, right? It's all done by the printer.
Right.
So it's not really applicable to postcards. If I was doing something like a very targeted handwritten letter, and Christy, that may be my answer. Quite honestly, if you had a limited budget, I would find a list of people in your area who are high income earners, who have children, and I would write them a personal letter. And I would stamp it with a normal stamp, and I would send that out. That's going to get opened, right? And what we're really talking about is FaceTime with people who could be your target audience. So I'm going to save us some time and not answer that this week. If I had $250, I would absolutely do that. I would buy the list and I would send them a letter a month.
That's a great note. I wanted to answer Christy's second question, keeping track of the effectiveness of each marketing campaign. You want to make sure that you're measuring your conduits. And here's what I mean by that. If your primary call to action, like the postcard Matt showed us, you'll notice that he had a text message option, text, terrific to this number. He had a web address option. It was bergamoschools.com/terrific. And then he had a phone number option. Each one of those was not generic. So it wasn't text Bergamo, and it wasn't go to our website, and it wasn't call our main school. He has a specific conduit for every marketing campaign he does. So everything that we do, we use a separate phone number for. And you can purchase phone numbers with, honestly, they're very inexpensive through tools like Call Rails or Call Tracking Metrics. You can get them absolutely free through Google Voice, but that's a little harder to manage. So you want a different phone number for every marketing approach. You want a different landing page. So yourwebsite.com/ something specific. And then you can even use different email addresses for each marketing approach. And what that will do is it's the easiest way to see which campaign is your highest performer. And you'll also want to track it not according to the number of leads you're getting or tours that are being scheduled, but to the tours that are actually turning into admissions. Because if one marketing conduit, let's say Facebook gets you 100 tours and 0 tuition or admissions, but Google gets you 10 tours and 2 admissions, then Google's the better performer. And I realize that sounds obvious, me saying that, but I think you'd be surprised at how many people see activity and get excited about activity without really digging into what's resulting in monetization. Hopefully that's helpful. Anything to add on to that matter, Deneen?
No, I think that sounded great.
Christy, that's a great question. Thank you for both of those. Any other questions from our members or from our panelists, as it were? Awesome. Yes, this has been a great call. Matt, I loved seeing you get into the nitty-gritty. It was really kind of fun to watch you in your domain. Thank you so much for doing that. This has been one of my favorite coaching calls so far.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to doing the same thing with billboards.
Yeah, we're going to talk about billboards sometime soon. And until then, we will see you next Thursday, 10:30 a.m. Pacific. I believe that's 1:30 p.m. Eastern. And to everybody who joins us for the calls live, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your questions. If you're watching the recordings, just know that the live calls are available to our members. And you can always register by going to needlemarketing.com/coaching. Matt and Deneen, thank you both for being here.
See you next week. Bye-bye.